Good morning, everyone. So how many people here know somebody who has TikTok? Could you raise your hand? Okay, a lot of you. I'm not going to ask if you have your own TikTok account because I don't know if I would get an honest answer. But the question of this hour, should TikTok be banned? So for those of you that are unfamiliar, TikTok is a hugely popular social media app. And Western countries are now debating whether it should be banned, citing security concerns. Their main argument is that TikTok's parent company, ByteDance, is Chinese, and therefore it cannot legally refuse to share user data from the US or Europe with the Chinese government if it was ordered to do so under China's internet security law. However, is this really just a lot of smoke without fire? I mean, after all social media apps collect user data, and they can all be requested to hand it over to the government if asked. So why are we signaling out China? Is it just an easy target for Western countries to unite around? And wouldn't banning an app like TikTok actually make us more like China, instead of the open democracies we claim to be, where one of our proudest achievements is the freedom of speech and choice? That's what we're going to debate with my two excellent speakers. But first, we want to know where you currently stand on this issue with a vote. So for that, I'm going to hand over to Camilla Banja to talk you through our election integrity process.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, my main task today is to guide you well into the voting system for today's votes. I have the privilege of being part of Assembly Voting, a 23-year-old Danish company rooted in academia and the Danish democracy tradition. We believe that all democratic elections require verifiability and that democracy is a culture that needs to be learned and practiced. Most existing voting software solutions have black box characteristics. In other words, things that are happening behind closed doors that neither can be seen nor independently checked against manipulation. This is unacceptable, especially in an environment of increasing mistrust against authorities. Verifiability should be mathematically proven and independently auditable by design. We are today able to make end-to-end verifiable online elections, meaning that it can be verified that the vote is cast as intended, registered as cast, and counted as registered. A digital voting process must, as minimum, comply to all the same requirements we set out for the physical polling station, while assuring that trust is distributed, anonymity is secured, and with full transparency for independent scrutiny. This while making this technology accessible and affordable for all votes and elections, not just the national governmental elections. We now see into a great educational task of educating voters and all the various stakeholders on what to require for online voting to be secure and verifiable. And we reach out for you to be part of this journey. I will now quickly go through a few steps to vote. If you haven't downloaded the app, and I should say this is kind of a test vote that we'll use the TikTok debate to do. So don't despair if something is teasing you. We'll be standing, Assembly Voting and Trifork, who has made the app and for the Democracy Summit and the registration process, will be standing outside that door and helping anybody who has problems, so you can be ready for the election of the democracy and technology entrepreneurs later today. But you need to download the app. You need to click the little live poll under the 4 small dots. You'll come into that menu, click the live poll. If you haven't signed up yet, you should put in a valid email address. You will be emailed a 6-cipher code that you need to sign in with. Please check your junk email, spam mail if you don't get it. When you click the live poll next time, there will open the first debate. You will mark your choice. and submit it. As long as the vote is open, you will be able to redo your vote, and we will show a small result. Short note that now you are registered, it will be the live poll button for all the polls, also the next TikTok poll, and the poll later, or the election for the entrepreneurs later. So if you log out of this window, just go to the app and click the live poll again, and it will open a window. Thank you.
Thank you, Camilla. So, ladies and gentlemen, cast your vote right now. Do you think TikTok should be banned? And whilst you're voting, I'd like to introduce my two excellent speakers to join me on stage. So to argue for the ban, we have Nathan Law on my right, who is a former member of parliament from Hong Kong, who now lives in exile in London. And arguing against the TikTok ban is Jameel Jaffer, who is the executive director of the Knight First Amendment Institute at Columbia University. So we're still seeing that your voting is in progress. So we're going to start this debate and would like you to also vote at the end to see if my two fabulous speakers have managed to inform you, expand your minds, change your minds. So to kick us off, I'm going to give you both just a couple of minutes to outline your main arguments for why it should be banned, why it shouldn't be banned, and then we're going to get into a debate. So Jameel, if I could start with you, why do you think TikTok should not be banned?
Well, first, good morning, everybody. Authoritarian and other rights-abusing regimes all over the world are using national security as a pretext for restricting their citizens' right to access foreign media, including social media. This is a hallmark of authoritarian regimes. It's no accident that the governments most associated with this practice include the governments of Iran, Saudi Arabia, and China. Just a few days ago, we saw Prime Minister Erdogan in Turkey restricting access to Twitter in the days ahead of an election. That was appalling, but it wasn't surprising. Authoritarians have always held on to power by restricting their citizens' ability to learn about the world and to organize. I think we should be very careful about giving those kinds of powers to our own governments. The freedom of speech, access to information, the right to read and engage with the media of one's choice, these are some of the features that make democracy worth defending. Now, maybe there are circumstances in which democracies have no choice but to restrict their citizens' access to foreign technology platforms. Maybe. But democracy shouldn't go down that road unless it's the only option. It needs to be the last resort. And with respect to TikTok, we have other options. There are lots of policy options that would allow us to address or mitigate the risks associated with TikTok without shutting down access to a platform that's used by hundreds of millions of people. It's not just that there are other policy options. It's also that banning TikTok would be counterproductive. It would deny our own human rights advocates access to a tool, a powerful tool for communication, organization, and accountability. It would restrict freedoms that are the lifeblood of every open society. And it would set a dangerous precedent that would give autocrats the ability to justify their own censorship. So I think banning TikTok would be totally inconsistent with our own values. It would also be a gift to autocrats and strongmen everywhere.
Thank you, Jameel. Now, Nathan, it seems that most of the audience here actually agree with you that TikTok should be banned. So let's hear from you quickly on your main argument.
Well, thank you, Melissa. When you wake up in the morning and you start scrolling your cell phone, maybe you see funny videos of cats and dogs and sometimes some political news. You thought that it might be the content that you enjoy. But what if they were just the content that the platform wants to feed you, potentially with malicious intentions? Ladies and gentlemen, I'm today arguing that democratic countries should ban TikTok. TikTok is operated by a Chinese company heavily influenced by the PRC government, and they will have no choice but to serve the ambition of Xi Jinping eventually and if necessary. However, today we're not only just talking about TikTok. I invite you to rethink, as democracies have been in decline for consecutive 17 years, how we can protect our cherished values from the information warfare and the propaganda of dictatorial regimes. I want you to ask yourself, what would you do if autocracies is abusing our freedom to attack our system? TikTok boasts more than 1 billion users worldwide, and in the US alone, there are 150 million users. It's a powerful tool controlled by ByteDance, a Chinese-listed company. Within ByteDance, there's a Chinese Communist Party's branch that there are people who are having the background of the political party that are instructing what to do in the companies and monitoring them. BuzzFeed once interviewed employees in TikTok to understand the relationship between these two entities. They portray the companies as being so closely entwined that it is unclear where TikTok ends and where ByteDance starts. TikTok is a tool that can easily be manipulated by the Chinese Communist Party. We've already seen several incidents in the past. In 2019, news reported that TikTok censored content that are critical of China. For example, content talking about the Tiananmen massacre, Tibetan independence, and the commentaries on Hong Kong protests. Recently, they also banned an account, Acton Institute, because they produced documentaries about one of the most vocal Hong Kong dissident, Jameel, and they reinstated that after facing severe criticism. As long as TikTok has the power to control who sees what, and the Chinese regime has access to manage the company, this is potentially the nuclear warhead of the information warfare the Chinese government could launch when the time comes, when the time suits them. They can promote authoritarianism, minimize the reputational loss to them, and also facilitate division and brew hatred among civil societies. Ladies and gentlemen, our freedom, our democracies are fragile. They are in decline. Autocracies are advancing, and their toolbox are being renewed. And so must we. We need to step up our defense of democracy. And that's why banning TikTok is one of them. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So the clock is ticking. I'm going to try and get in as many questions as I can. So Jameel, Nathan just outlined some examples of censorship already on TikTok. There's also evidence that to show that TikTok is a security threat. Last year in October, TikTok was found to have been tracking Forbes journalists, after they exposed TikTok's ties to ByteDance in China. And also, Forbes found that 300 employees of TikTok had formerly worked for Chinese state media. I mean, isn't this evidence compelling enough to say that we should have a ban?
Yeah, well, let me make sure that I'm not misunderstood here. I'm not here to defend TikTok. I think TikTok is absolutely collecting tons of information about its users. I think it can be used as a disinformation tool. I agree with a lot of what Nathan said. I also agree that democracies are on their back foot, and we need to counter this threat of authoritarianism. I think where we disagree is in the how. How do you counter the threat to authoritarianism here? And I don't think we can counter this threat by becoming more like authoritarian regimes. I think we should lean into our own freedoms, the things that distinguish us from authoritarian regimes. And if you look back, I'm more familiar with American history than the history of these issues globally, but if you look at the United States in the 1960s and 70s during the Cold War, there were lots of similar arguments being made to deny Americans access to ideas from abroad on the grounds that the ideas were disinformation or communist propaganda. On that basis, the United States banned a lot of foreign scholars and foreign writers from the country. Pablo Neruda, Gabriel Garcia Marquez, Pierre Trudeau was banned from the United States on the grounds that his ideas were a threat. And I see, I don't want to draw an equation here, but I do see a little bit of those ideas in the proposal to ban TikTok today. Again, the question is not whether TikTok presents a threat. I absolutely agree, it does. The question is how do we address it? Can I say just one more thing on that topic, which is that the concerns that Nathan very justifiably raises are concerns about other platforms as well.
And that's where I'm going to jump in, because Nathan, you made a very compelling argument about TikTok and how it's censoring, and the algorithms show people what they want to see. But I would say so does Facebook. I mean, and in fact, when you talk about security concerns, we have evidence that Russia used Facebook to interfere in the 2016 election in the US, 2020. We've seen that Cambridge Analytica misused UK user data in the Brexit vote. We've just had US secrets released on Discord, which is a gaming platform. I mean, Uber tracks us. Isn't this just par for the course of using technology?
Well, definitely, we should step up our monitoring to these social media. I do believe that they are not just private platforms. They're being used by billions of people, and there should be more, at least, participation from the public on how the algorithm works and how all those community rules are being made. But my point is not only about social media. My point is about a social media that is easily being manipulated by a malicious regime that aims at destroying our democracy. If you look at how China has been behaving, they've been really aggressive. Before the first Summer for Democracy, they even have a white paper saying that they are the democracy that works. Like, no one elected Xi Jinping, and they says that they are the democracy that works, and US sucks, and that is their basic stance. And if such a regime is able to manipulate an app that is being used by a billion people, that would be really dangerous. And I don't think that if we ban TikTok, that will be equivalent to marching forward authoritarianism, because I lived in Hong Kong, I lived in China, I know that how authoritarian censorship works. There are just things that you cannot say. And there is a joke about Chinese netizens, and they always said that you have freedom of speech, but only once, because when you use it, you're gone. And that is how authoritarian censorship works. If we ban TikTok, we can still use other platforms.
But hang on, that's a really good point, because you talk about Hong Kong. I mean, activists have always used whatever technology is available. And in Hong Kong, we saw activists using Facebook, using other social media apps to get the word out. Now you see freedom fighters on TikTok. There's a very famous example in 2019 of a New Jersey teenager who was doing a makeup tutorial, but actually teaching people about the plight of the Uyghurs. So isn't it kind of hypocritical for you, a freedom fighter, to call for a ban on social media that other freedom fighters are using?
Well, Vanessa, you just mentioned a really good example, because that is the example that can demonstrate how dangerous it is. They can actually suppress the traffic under the name of algorithm, and they just say that no one sees your video because it is not popular, but they can actually re-engineer it, and they can suppress the views of the other people because it is critical of China. The video you mentioned exactly, that there were research showing that, well, not that many people could see that, even though it is popular. So that is what the potential danger lies ahead. It is really difficult for us to discern, or because TikTok is so, there are not much information about how it works and who works for that. And China has been really concealing that from all of us, that they can easily use the disguise of algorithm to really hide their censorship.
So some people would say that Facebook does the same thing with its algorithm, and Twitter is a whole different topic that we could have a whole other debate about. But at the moment, TikTok, through Project Texas, has agreed to host their servers on American soil. There's a similar project in Europe. It's called Project Clover. And the idea is that if their servers are hosted on the country's soil, that country has jurisdiction over the user data, and China couldn't get its hands on it. So a question for both of you, but Jameel, I'll start with you. Do you think this addresses the security concerns?
No, I don't think it's enough. I think that what we really need are privacy rules, new privacy rules that restrict what social media platforms and other platforms can collect. We need transparency mandates that make it easier for us to understand what's going on these platforms, how disinformation is being spread. We need better protections for journalists and researchers who study the platforms. There are lots of ways to address or mitigate the risks. And again, I agree the risks are real without shutting down access to the platform. I also think it's important to recognize that the Chinese government doesn't need TikTok in order to run disinformation campaigns, right? Russia doesn't own Facebook, but it ran a disinformation campaign on Facebook. And China doesn't even need TikTok in order to gather information about millions of people, because a lot of the information that TikTok collects, very similar information, is available for sale from American data brokers. If you want to address this problem, and again, I think the problem is very real. In fact, I think it's bigger. It's not about TikTok alone. It's about all of these platforms. If you want to address those problems, you need rules like these. Just banning TikTok or localizing the data storage, I don't think is enough. I do think that storage of data locally is necessary. I just don't think it's sufficient.
And what about if, there's one of the solutions that has been floated around is that TikTok should make it apparent to its users that they could be tracked by the Chinese Communist Party. Do you think that they should do that?
Well, I think the privacy concern is not my most appealing argument. It is a concern, but my argument is that Jameel really puts it beautifully. If Russia could do it with Facebook, an app that they have no control over, and you could see all these misinformation and information warfare campaigns are so clandestine, are so hidden. What if China is going to use TikTok to do it because they have full control over it? A lot of employees in TikTok, they're saying that they actually don't know who they are reporting to. They have received orders saying that they are from Beijing, and they have a lot of previous experience engaging with their managers, and they don't know who gave the orders, and that's the danger of it. And in ByteDance, there are lots of employees in mainland China that are working as coders, programmers for TikTok, who we have no idea and no transparency over how they make all those things happen. And that is the danger of it.
Okay, so hypothetically, if the US were to implement a ban, what would that look like in your opinion?
What would it look like? I don't know what it would look like. I can say that the government would have a hard time justifying it in court. The Supreme Court in the US recognized just a few years ago that Americans have a right of access to social media. That's not surprising, because the First Amendment has been understood to protect not just the right to speak, but also the right to receive information. That's true of the ICCPR as well. Article 17 protects both the right to speak and the right to hear. When the Trump administration tried to ban TikTok a couple of years ago, 2 different courts in the US struck the bans down. Congress could make it easier for the government to ban TikTok, but Congress can't override the First Amendment. So I think that President Biden would have a hard time justifying it. But I don't think we should get there. I mean, I think that the dangers of this policy are clear, and I think Nathan makes a good point when he says it's not just about TikTok. It isn't just about TikTok. This is a precedent that will be used against other platforms as well. And if the concern is that the Chinese government has incredible leverage over TikTok, it also has leverage over American platforms. I mean, the reason that Elon Musk takes down this content that's critical of leaders in India and Turkey is that those leaders have leverage over him, right? So if you adopt this argument, you have to think about how that argument's going to be used, not just by President Biden, but by the next president. It might be President Trump or President DeSantis. What are they going to do with this precedent that allows them to shut down access to foreign media?
So I want to dig into that a little bit, and this is a question for both of you, and then I'm going to invite the audience to vote, so stand by. But talking about that, so there is legislation at the moment in the US. It's called the Restrict Act, and this would give the US wide-ranging powers, to ban any kind of technology it sees as a threat to, quote, national security. And this could effectively lead to a whole load of censorship at home and abroad. I mean, do you think it's dangerous for governments and the US government to be able to ban apps, online platforms, under the guise of national security?
There are in the App Store right now, I think 4 of the top 15 apps are Chinese. So I don't think, even if, I'm not sure how you draw the line between TikTok and the next 3. And then 6 months from now, there are going to be Indian apps on there too. How are we going to draw the line between TikTok and those apps? And then there are American apps that are heavily influenced by foreign countries. How are we going to draw the line between all the other apps and the American apps? I think that this is a very dangerous precedent. And I understand the instinct because I agree with Nathan that TikTok presents very real risks. But again, banning has to be a last resort. We're not going to win this battle with authoritarian regimes by adopting their tactics.
And Nathan, I want you to weigh on this, specifically the Restrict Act, because, whilst we're talking about TikTok and we keep signaling out China, it seems hypocritical because we have social media apps that are based in the US doing the same thing. So what do you think about the sweeping powers that would give the US government this act, if that's one of the solutions being tabled to ban TikTok?
Well, I think first of all, this should not be a US-centric discussion because we are all facing the same threats. Like democracy are facing information warfare from these regimes, and we should think about it in the US, in EU, and other democratic allies. And for me, as I said, I think the approach is so different from being authoritarian. It is actually democracy stepping up. I agree with Jameel that this is not something that is old, like that we have precedence. It is a new thing, but it is a new thing because the world has been evolving. We've all seen how dangerous social media could be if there are no monitoring. And I also agree that we have to have a lot more restrictions on privacy collection and all those things in other social media. But my point is, yes, this app, TikTok, it is really going to influence a lot of, especially of our younger generations, in the disguise of a free platform. It is actually like they are going to have a lot of censorship under the name of a business interest or under the shadow of you are just not popular. And I think that would create a lot of troubles in our society, which are like all the other apps, they are big techs, but they are not with a regime that are so hostile to our system.
But then let me ask you, so, one of the best things about democracy is the fact that we have the freedom of speech, the freedom of choice, that we trust our citizens to be well-informed and then be able to make their own decisions, based on the information they have. Given the fact that all this information is out there, don't you think us advocating for a ban is making us more like China and the autocracies?
I really do not think that is a free speech issue. It is actually an issue addressing free speech. If we think about TikTok, Chinese government trying to push the button and utilize it, users are unlikely to see contents that are critical of China, and they will see a lot of contents that will make you think that you're living in a parallel universe with the people sitting beside you. It will create a lot of social division, and it will suppress content in an unjust proportion that makes people misinformed. And I don't think allowing platforms like this to exist fits the idea of free speech, because if we think about free speech, we think about we can speak and our voice are not unjustly suppressed. So if you are on Facebook and you post a video and no one can see it because the system assigns you as only for me weight of your visibility, and there's only one view of your video, do you consider it as freedom of speech? Do you consider it as a just platform? And we are going into a phase where the contention of China and US will be rising. And what if China is going to invade Taiwan and they want to do a big propaganda warfare show, and they make every video about critical of China being seen only by you? And this is likely to happen if we're being too complacent and we don't act now.
So we've heard some very compelling arguments, and I have so many more questions, so I think we're going to have to finish this in the coffee break, and you can ask them your questions too. But I would like you to just cast a vote to see if any of you have changed your minds or, have a different view or are more undecided, so please do that. And as we just wait for the results, I'm just going to ask you both, to close, it seems like you both agree that all of social media should essentially be regulated as opposed to us focusing potentially on one app. Would you agree?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, I think the format makes Jameel and I, they're quite different, but actually we kind of agree on 90% of the whole spectrum of things.
So in terms of all of social media and opposed to TikTok, just being singled out.
Yeah,
So
I think a lot of these policy options would address bigger issues.
So we started with 38 people who were for the ban, and now we have 60 people who are against the ban. So we have been able to move the needle here. And I would like to thank both of my speakers and invite you all to ask some more questions in the coffee break, which I believe is going to begin now.
Thanks, Baker.